The heavens had opened up without warning, turning the dusty streets of Marysville, California, into rivers of mud. But Clara Zimmerman refused to let her freshly washed linens be ruined by another day of delay. A crack of thunder boomed overhead as she frantically gathered sheets from the clothesline, her fingers numb from the cold rain that pelted her face and soaked through her simple cotton dress. April 1876 had proven to be unseasonably wet, and for a young widow trying to maintain a boarding house on the edge of town, every setback felt like nature's personal vendetta against her. Clara's golden hair, usually pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, now hung in wet strands around her face as she fought against the wind that threatened to tear the sheets from her grasp. She didn't notice the lone rider approaching through the curtain of rain until he was nearly upon her property. The stranger sat tall in his saddle, his broad shoulders draped in a worn leather duster, water streaming from the brim of his hat. Clara froze, one hand clutching a pillowcase, the other reaching for the small knife she kept in her apron pocket. "Need some help with that, madam?" His voice carried across the yard despite the downpour, deep and steady like distant thunder. Clara squinted through the rain. "I can manage," she called back, though a particularly strong gust nearly knocked her off her feet, sending one sheet sailing toward the mud. In one fluid motion, the man dismounted, catching the runaway linen before it touched the ground. He was taller than she'd first thought, with eyes the color of the storm clouds overhead and a face weathered by sun and wind. He couldn't have been more than 30, but there was something in his gaze that spoke of miles traveled and troubles weathered. "Name's Adam Lawson," he said, approaching with the rescued sheet carefully folded over his arm. "Seems like you could use an extra set of hands." Clara hesitated, sizing him up. His clothes were travel-worn but clean, his boots caked with the mud of distant trails. The six-shooter holstered at his side wasn't unusual for these parts, but the way he carried himself alert yet relaxed marked him as someone accustomed to watching his back. "Clara Zimmerman," she finally replied, accepting the sheet with a nod of thanks. "My clothesline's about to give way in this wind." Without another word, Adam strode to where the wooden post supporting one end of the line had begun to tilt precariously in the softened earth. He braced it with his shoulder, holding it steady while Clara quickly gathered the remaining laundry. "You running that boarding house alone?" he asked, nodding toward the two-story structure behind her. Clara's chin lifted slightly. "My husband passed last year, influenza." She didn't add that Jonathan had left her with more debts than dollars, or that keeping the boarding house afloat was becoming increasingly impossible. "Sorry to hear that." There was no pity in his voice, just a simple acknowledgement of her loss. When the last of the laundry was safely in her basket, Clara expected the stranger to mount up and continue on his way. Instead, he remained by the post, one hand still bracing it against the wind. "This post needs proper setting," he observed, bending to examine where it met the ground. "Won't last another storm like this." "I'm aware," Clara said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. The list of repairs needed around the property kept her awake most nights. Adam straightened, rain dripping from his hat brim. "I'm handy with tools." "Looking for a place to stay for a few nights. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement." Clara studied him for a long moment. Travelers pass through Marysville regularly on their way to the gold country further north, or to Sacramento to the south. Most were decent enough, but experience had taught her caution. "I've got a room," she said finally, "but I'll need references." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Sheriff McCoy over in Nevada City knows me. So does Marcus Talbot at the Mercantile in Sacramento." Names she recognized from respectable men. Clara nodded once. "Very well, Mr. Lawson. Let's get out of this rain and we can discuss terms." As they hurried toward the house, Adam still holding the clothesline post with one hand and guiding his horse with the other, Clara couldn't help but notice the way his other hand had found the small of her back, steadying her when she slipped in the mud. His touch was light, respectful, but sent an unexpected warmth through her rain-chilled body. By the time they reached the covered porch, the downpour had intensified. Clara paused at the door, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled appearance and the impropriety of inviting a strange man into her home. "You can stable your horse around back," she said, gesturing to the small barn. "I'll prepare some hot coffee." Adam nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "Much obliged, Mrs. Zimmerman." As Clara watched him lead his horse away, she couldn't shake the feeling that her orderly, if difficult, existence had just been irrevocably altered by a stranger who had appeared like a specter in the storm. Inside the boarding house, Clara moved with practiced efficiency, stoking the fire in the kitchen stove and putting on water to boil. The main floor consisted of a modest parlor, a dining room that could seat up to 8 guests, and her private quarters tucked behind the kitchen. The second floor held 5 rooms for boarders, only 2 of which were currently occupied by a retired schoolteacher and a young clerk working at the assayer's office. Clara had just changed into a dry dress when she heard a knock at the back door. Adam stood there, hat in hand, his duster removed to reveal a simple flannel shirt and suspenders. His sandy brown hair was damp and slightly curled at the collar. "Come in, Mr. Lawson," she said, stepping aside. "The coffee's nearly ready." "Thank you." He wiped his boots thoroughly before entering, a courtesy not all her guests remembered to observe. "Your horse is settled. Fine animal. Morgan mix." Clara nodded, surprised by his accurate assessment. "My husband bought her 4 years ago. She pulls the wagon when I need supplies." Adam followed her into the kitchen, his tall frame making the room seem suddenly smaller. He stood with his back to the wall, a habit Clara had noticed in men who'd spent time in dangerous territory. "How long has this place been a boarding house?" he asked, accepting the steaming mug she offered. 5 years. We came west from Missouri after the war. Jonathan had dreams of striking it rich in the goldfields, but," she shrugged, "we ended up opening this place instead." "Smart decision," Adam commented. "More reliable than chasing color." Clara leaned against the counter, warming her hands on her own mug. "Are you passing through or staying in these parts?" Something flickered across his face, caution, perhaps, or calculation. "Haven't decided yet. Looking for somewhere to put down roots, maybe. Been riding for a long while." "And before that," she pressed, wanting to know what manner of man she was allowing into her home. Adam met her gaze steadily. "Fought for the Union. Scouted for the Army after that. Did some cattle driving in Texas. Most recently, I've been doing security for freight wagons between Sacramento and the mining towns." A man comfortable with weapons then, but not, she hoped, a gunslinger or outlaw. Clara had heard enough stories of notorious men passing through quiet towns to be wary. "And what brings you to Marysville specifically?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Heard it was peaceful. After a while, a man gets tired of looking over his shoulder." Clara understood that sentiment all too well. "My room rates are $1.50 per night, including breakfast and dinner. Laundry is extra. And if I do some repairs around the place," Clara considered this. Money was tight, and there were a dozen things that needed fixing before the next winter. "We can adjust the rate accordingly depending on the work done." Adam nodded, setting down his empty cup. "Seems fair. I noticed your roof's missing some shingles, and that front step has a worrying creak, not to mention the clothesline post." "You noticed all that in a downpour." "I notice things," he said simply. "Habit." Clara showed him to a room on the second floor at the end of the hallway. It was simply furnished with a bed, a washstand, and a small table with a lamp. The window overlooked the yard where they'd met less than an hour earlier. "Dinner's at 6, she informed him. "You'll meet the other boarders then." Adam set his saddlebags on the bed. "I'll take a look at that clothesline post before dark if the rain lets up." Clara paused at the door. "Mr. Lawson, I run a respectable establishment, I expect—" "You have my word, Mrs. Zimmerman," he interrupted gently, understanding her unspoken concerns. "I respect boundaries." Something in his tone conveyed more than mere politeness, and Clara found herself believing him. She nodded once and left him to settle in, unsure why her heart was beating a touch faster than usual. The rain did ease by late afternoon, though the sky remained heavy with clouds. True to his word, Adam set to work on the clothesline post, digging deeper into the soil and bracing it properly with stones he gathered from the creek bed that ran along the edge of the property. Clara watched from the kitchen window as he worked methodically, his movements efficient and sure. By dinner time, he had not only fixed the post but also repaired the loose step on the front porch. He arrived at the table freshly washed, his hair still damp, and Clara made introductions to her other boarders, Miss Harriet Willoughby, the retired teacher with steel gray hair and piercing eyes that missed nothing, and Benjamin Foster, the earnest young clerk whose round spectacles gave him a perpetually surprised expression. "Mr. Lawson will be staying with us for a time," Clara explained as she served a simple but hearty stew. "He's kindly offered to help with some repairs around the house." "Thank heavens," Miss Willoughby remarked. "That leak in the hallway ceiling has been most disruptive to my reading." "I'll take a look at it tomorrow," Adam promised, accepting the bread Clara passed him. "Along with the roof." Throughout the meal, Clara noticed how Adam spoke little but listened intently, his eyes occasionally meeting hers across the table. There was something reassuring about his presence, a quiet strength that filled the room without dominating it. When Benjamin mentioned trouble with claim jumpers at one of the smaller mines outside town, Adam asked a few pointed questions that revealed knowledge of both mining operations and the law information that Clara filed away. After dinner, while Clara cleared the dishes, Adam surprised her by rolling up his sleeves and offering to help. "Not necessary," she protested. "You've already earned your keep today." "My mother raised me to pitch in," he replied, already gathering plates. Said idle hands weren't welcome at her table. Working beside him in the kitchen, Clara was acutely aware of his proximity. It had been over a year since Jonathan's death, a year of solitary meals and empty conversations. Adam moved with an easy grace that belied his size, careful not to crowd her in the small space. "You handle a boarding house well," he commented as he dried the dishes she washed. "Must be challenging on your own." Clara's hands slowed in the soapy water. "It is. But there aren't many options for a widow without family in these parts." "No children." A familiar ache tightened her chest. "No, it wasn't God's plan for us, I suppose." Adam nodded, not pressing further. "My sister runs a similar establishment in Denver. Took it over after her husband was killed in a mining accident. She has 2 boys to raise. It must be difficult for her. She's strong, like you seem to be." There was no flattery in his tone, just a simple observation that nonetheless warmed Clara more than the fire in the stove. By the time the kitchen was cleaned, night had fully fallen, and the rain had returned, drumming steadily on the roof. Clara lit a lamp to guide Adam back to his room. "Thank you for your help today, Mr. Lawson," she said formally, handing him the lamp. "Adam," he corrected gently. "If I'm going to be fixing your roof, we might as well use Christian names." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Adam, good night." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Clara." As she prepared for bed in her small room behind the kitchen, Clara found herself thinking about the stranger who had appeared in the rain. There was something about Adam Lawson that intrigued her, a depth behind his quiet demeanor, a history in the lines around his eyes when he smiled. It had been a long time since she'd noticed such things about a man, and the realization made her both uneasy and strangely hopeful. The following morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous day's storm had never happened. Clara rose early, as was her habit, to prepare breakfast for her boarders. She was mixing batter for flapjacks when she heard movement outside and glanced out the window to see Adam already at work, examining the roof from a ladder he must have found in the barn. By the time her other boarders came down for breakfast, Adam had been working for over an hour. He joined them with the smell of fresh air clinging to his clothes and a healthy appetite that Clara found oddly satisfying to fulfill. "The damage isn't as bad as it could be," he reported. "Some shingles need replacing and there's a spot that needs proper sealing. I can have it fixed by tomorrow if you've got the materials." "I don't," Clara admitted. "I'll need to place an order with Jensen at the lumber yard." "I can ride into town for you," Adam offered. "Save you the trip." Clara calculated the cost in her head, weighing necessity against her dwindling funds. "I'm not sure I can afford all the repairs at once." Adam seemed to read her hesitation. "Let me take a full inventory first. We'll prioritize what needs immediate attention." After breakfast, Clara gave Adam a tour of the property, pointing out the various issues that needed addressing: the sagging back porch, the window frames that let in drafts during winter, the pump that sometimes required priming several times before yielding water. With each problem, Adam nodded thoughtfully, occasionally kneeling to examine something more closely or testing a structure with his hands. "Your husband built this place?" he asked as they walked the perimeter of the property. "No, we purchased it from a family heading back east. Jonathan made some improvements, but—" Clara trailed off, remembering her husband's grand plans that never quite materialized. He had been a dreamer, not a builder. He wasn't much for carpentry, Adam guessed, his tone free of judgment. Clara smiled sadly. He had other talents: music, storytelling. The children in town loved him. Important gifts, Adam acknowledged, though perhaps not ideal for maintaining a boarding house. They had reached the creek that marked the eastern boundary of her property. The recent rain had swollen it, and the current rushed merrily over smooth stones. "Jonathan always talked about building a proper footbridge here," Clara said, indicating where the creek narrowed. "For now, we use those stepping stones when the water's low." Adam studied the creek, then looked back at the house. "Good spot for it. Wouldn't be difficult to construct something sturdy." As they stood there in the morning sunshine, Clara was struck by how comfortable she felt in Adam's presence, despite having known him for less than a day. There was something steadying about him, like a well-built foundation. "Why did you really come to Marysville?" she asked suddenly. Adam turned to face her, his expression open yet guarded. "Truth," Clara nodded. "I've been tracking someone," he admitted. "A man who robbed a bank in Sacramento 2 months back. Shot a teller who was a friend of mine. Word came he might be hiding out in these parts." Clara's heart quickened. "You're a lawman, former deputy marshal," Adam clarified. "I don't wear a badge anymore, but I gave my word to my friend's widow that I'd find the man responsible. And once you do," his eyes hardened slightly, "I'll bring him to justice, proper justice, through the courts if possible." Clara absorbed this information, understanding now his watchfulness, the way he positioned himself in rooms. "Is that why you notice so much about my property? You're used to observing details." A smile touched his lips. "Partly. but I also grew up helping my father with his carpentry business. Noticing what needs fixing comes naturally. They walked back to the house in thoughtful silence. Clara had questions, many of them, but she sensed Adam had shared as much as he was comfortable with for now. And somehow, knowing he had a purpose beyond simply drifting through made her feel more at ease with his presence. Not less. Over the next 3 days, Adam proved himself to be as skilled with repairs as he'd claimed. He fixed the roof, reinforced the back porch, repaired 3 window frames, and improved the water pump's reliability. Each evening, he joined the household for dinner, gradually sharing more about his life, his childhood in Illinois, his service during the war, his time as a deputy marshal in Wyoming and later California. In turn, Clara found herself opening up about her own past, her upbringing in a small Missouri town, her whirlwind courtship with Jonathan, their journey west with dreams that slowly transformed into practical compromise. She didn't speak of the loneliness that had become her constant companion since Jonathan's death, but somehow she felt Adam understood it anyway. On the 4th day, Adam rode into town to purchase supplies for the footbridge he'd offered to build across the creek. Clara used his absence to catch up on baking, preparing a special apple pie as a small token of appreciation for his work. She was removing it from the oven when Miss Willoughby entered the kitchen, her sharp eyes taking in the scene with evident amusement. "That's not your usual Wednesday baking, Clara," the older woman observed. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the oven. "Mr. Lawson has been working hard. I thought he might appreciate something sweet. MMM." Miss Willoughby's knowing hum spoke volumes. "He's certainly been a godsend for this place, and not at all hard on the eyes, I might add." "Miss Willoughby," Clara protested, though she couldn't help but smile at the older woman's frankness. "Oh, don't Miss Willoughby me. I may be 62, but I'm not blind." She patted Clara's arm. "It's good to see some color in your cheeks again, dear. You've been fading away this past year." Clara turned to arranging cups on the shelf, avoiding the former teacher's perceptive gaze. "Adam is just passing through. He has obligations elsewhere. Does he now?" Miss Willoughby raised an eyebrow. "Well, obligations have a way of changing when the right opportunity presents itself. My Henry was just passing through Joplin when we met, stayed 43 years until the Lord called him home." Before Clara could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. She moved to the window to see Adam returning, his horse loaded with lumber and supplies. There was something different about his demeanor, a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there when he left. "Something's happened," Clara murmured, drying her hands on her apron and heading for the door. She met Adam in the yard as he dismounted. His expression was grim, his eyes scanning the surroundings with heightened vigilance. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "The man I've been tracking," Adam replied, his voice low. "He was spotted near Sacramento again. But there's word he has associates in this area." His eyes met hers, concern evident. "I need to check with the local sheriff, see what he knows." Clara nodded, helping him unload the supplies. "Will you be leaving then?" Something flickered in Adam's eyes, reluctance perhaps. "Not yet. But I may need to soon." He paused, noticing her expression. "I'd like to finish the bridge first, if that's all right. I don't like leaving things half done." "Of course," Clara said, surprised by the disappointment that swept through her. She'd known he wouldn't stay indefinitely. Yet somehow the boarding house already felt different with him, in it warmer, more secure. That evening at dinner, Clara noticed Adam was quieter than usual, his attention occasionally drifting to the windows as darkness fell. After the meal, when the other boarders had retired to their rooms, he lingered in the kitchen as Clara washed the dishes. "I should tell you," he said finally, his voice low and serious. If the man I'm looking for has connections here, there's a small chance my presence could bring trouble. Clara's hands stilled in the dishwater. What kind of trouble? The man's name is Elias Garner. He's dangerous, Clara. Killed 3 people that I know of. Adam's jaw tightened. If he learns I'm here looking for him, he might take issue with that. And you think he might have friends in Marysville? Adam leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Sheriff mentioned rumors of a gang using farms outside town as hideouts. Nothing confirmed, but enough to be cautious. Clara dried her hands slowly, absorbing this information. Should I be worried? No, Adam said firmly. But I want you to be aware, and I think I should sleep downstairs tonight just as a precaution. The implication that he was concerned enough about her safety to stand guard sent a complex mixture of fear and something warmer through Clara's chest. That seems excessive, she protested, though without much conviction. Adam's expression softened slightly. Probably is, but I'd rest easier. Clara reluctantly agreed to let him sleep on the sofa in the parlor, providing him with blankets and a pillow. As she prepared for bed, she found herself both unsettled by the potential danger and strangely comforted by Adam's protective presence just beyond her door. Sleep came fitfully that night. Clara woke several times, listening to the familiar creaks of the old house and the unfamiliar sound of someone else's presence nearby. Once, she thought she heard Adam moving quietly through the lower floor, checking doors and windows. The knowledge that he was standing watch gave her an unexpected sense of security that eventually allowed her to drift into deeper sleep. Morning arrived with no disturbances beyond the usual roosters crowing, birds singing, the distant sound of a wagon on the main road. Clara found Adam already awake, rebuilding the fire in the kitchen stove. "Everything quiet?" she asked, tying her apron around her waist. He nodded. "As it should be. I'm probably being overly cautious." "Better that than the alternative," Clara replied, reaching for the coffee pot. Their hands brushed briefly, and she felt that now familiar warmth spread through her fingers. After breakfast, Adam began work on the footbridge, laying out the lumber and preparing the foundation on both sides of the creek. Clara brought him coffee mid-morning, watching as he worked with focused precision. "You're good at this," she observed, "building things." Adam looked up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the mild spring day. "Always found satisfaction in creating something useful, something that lasts." "Is that why you became a lawman? To create order?" He considered this, driving a stake into the ground with measured strikes of his hammer. "Partly. After the war I needed purpose. Upholding the law seemed necessary, especially in places where it was in short supply. And now—" Adam paused, his gaze meeting hers. "Now I'm starting to wonder if there might be other ways to build something lasting." Something in his tone made Clara's heart beat a little faster. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of approaching riders. Adam straightened, one hand moving instinctively toward his holstered revolver. 2 men appeared around the bend in the road, riding at a leisurely pace. They were rough-looking fellows, unshaven and trail-worn, with the hard eyes of men accustomed to taking what they wanted. "Stay behind me," Adam murmured, stepping forward as the riders approached the property. "Afternoon," called the first man, a burly figure with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "This the Zimmerman boarding house?" "It is," Clara replied, moving to stand beside Adam despite his warning glance. "Can I help you?" "Looking for lodging," the man said, his gaze shifting between Clara and Adam with calculation. 2 rooms if you got him." "We're full up," Adam stated before Clara could speak. His tone was neutral but firm. The second rider, thinner and younger with a patchy beard, snickered. "Don't look full to me. Big place like this." Clara felt tension radiating from Adam but kept her voice steady. I'm afraid we are at capacity currently. The Golden Rail Hotel in town has vacancies, I believe. The first man dismounted slowly, ignoring their response. Nice place you got here, madam. Shame to run it all by yourself. Heard about your situation in town. Adam stepped forward, his stance casual but his intent clear. The lady said there's no room. Best you move along. A dangerous stillness fell over the yard. The second man remained mounted, his hand resting near a holstered pistol, while the first man stood his ground, measuring Adam with cold eyes. Don't recall asking you, friend, he said, emphasizing the last word with obvious insincerity. Was talking to the widow. Clara's mouth went dry, recognizing the implicit threat in the man's demeanor. As I said, we have no vacancies. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to attend to. For a long moment, it seemed the men might press the issue. Then the mounted rider leaned forward. Come on, Rafe. Ain't worth the trouble. Not yet, anyhow. The man called Rafe held Adam's gaze for another beat before shrugging with exaggerated nonchalance. Another time, then. His eyes slid to Clara, lingering inappropriately. We'll be seeing you around, Mrs. Zimmerman. They rode away at the same unhurried pace, but the threat in their parting words hung in the air like gunsmoke. Friends of your bank robber? Clara asked quietly when they were out of earshot. Adam's jaw was tight. Possibly. The bigger one matched a description of one of Garner's known associates. He turned to her, concern evident in his eyes. Clara, I think you should consider staying in town for a few days. She straightened her spine. This is my home and my livelihood, Adam. I'm not abandoning it because two unsavory men came sniffing around. It wouldn't be the first time. This is different, he insisted. These men are killers, not just drifters. Then it's fortunate I have you here, she countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Unless you're planning to leave now. Adam's expression softened, a hint of admiration showing through his concern. No, I'm not going anywhere while those men are in the area. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, the unspoken growing between them like a living thing. Finally, Clara broke the silence. We should warn Miss Willoughby and Benjamin, she said practically. They should be alert for strangers. Adam nodded but caught her arm gently as she turned to go. Clara, she looked back at him, very aware of his hand on her arm. I won't let anything happen to you, he said simply. Clara covered his hand with her own, a gesture that felt both daring and completely natural. I know. The rest of the day passed without incident, though Adam insisted on checking the perimeter of the property several times. He continued work on the bridge when not standing watch, and by evening had completed the main structure. Clara found herself watching him from the kitchen window as he worked, admiring both his skill and the quiet determination with which he approached the task. That night after dinner, Clara sat in the parlor mending one of Benjamin's shirts while Adam cleaned his revolver at the table nearby. The familiar domestic scene struck her as strangely incongruous given the tension of the day, yet also oddly right. Tell me about your friend, she said suddenly. The one who was killed. Adam's hands paused on the weapon. Thomas Elliot. We served together during the war. He was a good man, honest, hardworking, had a wife and 2 young daughters. His voice grew softer. He wasn't even supposed to be working that day. Took an extra shift to earn money for his youngest girl's birthday. I'm sorry, Clara said gently. It's no wonder you want to bring his killer to justice. Adam reassembled the revolver with practiced movements. Justice is part of it, but there's more. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I'm tired of men like Garner thinking they can take whatever they want without consequence. Tired of good people living in fear. Is that why you became a marshal? It's why I stayed one as long as I did. Adam holstered the cleaned weapon. But after a while, I started to wonder if I was making any difference. For every outlaw brought in, two more seemed to take his place. Clara set her mending aside. "You're making a difference here." A small smile touched Adam's lips. "Building a footbridge hardly compares to upholding the law. Doesn't it? Both create something necessary. Both make life better for those who benefit from them." Clara leaned forward slightly. "And I'd wager your bridge will last longer than the memory of most outlaws you've captured." Adam looked at her with a new expression, something like wonder mixed with growing certainty. "You have a way of cutting to the heart of things, Clara Zimmerman." The clock in the hall chimed 9, breaking the moment. Clara rose, suddenly aware of how intimate their conversation had become. "I should check that everything's locked up for the night," she said, smoothing her skirts. "I already did," Adam replied, standing as well, "but I'll make another round before turning in." They stood facing each other in the warm lamplight, closer than propriety might allow, yet neither moving away. "Will you stay in Marysville?" Clara asked, the question that had been hovering in her mind finally finding voice. "After you find Garner." Adam's eyes held hers, searching. "Would you want me to?" Clara's heart beat faster. "I've found your carpentry skills quite valuable," she answered carefully. "Just my carpentry skills." There was a hint of teasing in his voice, but his eyes remained serious. Clara took a small, daring step closer. "Perhaps not just those." Adam's hand rose slowly to touch her cheek, giving her every opportunity to step away. Clara remained still, her breath catching as his fingers brushed her skin with infinite gentleness. "I've been alone a long time, Clara," he said quietly. "Riding from town to town, never staying long enough to form attachments. I told myself it was necessary for the work I did, but now I'm wondering if I've just been running from something else entirely." "What would that be?" Clara whispered. "The possibility of loss," he admitted. "It's easier not to care too deeply." Clara understood that fear intimately. After Jonathan's death, she had carefully walled off her heart, focusing on survival rather than connection. "Yes," she agreed softly. "It is easier, but is it better?" Before Adam could respond, a sound from outside caught their attention, the distinct crunch of footsteps on gravel. Adam moved instantly, extinguishing the lamp and drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. "Stay low," he whispered, moving to the window with practiced stealth. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she crouched behind a chair. Through the darkness, she could see Adam's silhouette as he carefully peered past the edge of the curtain. Long seconds passed in tense silence. Then Adam relaxed slightly. "It's Benjamin," he murmured, "coming back from town." Relief flooded through Clara, followed by a touch of embarrassment at her fear. Adam lit the lamp again, his vigilance easing but not disappearing entirely. "I should retire," Clara said, the spell of their earlier conversation broken by the interruption. "It's been a long day." Adam nodded, though something like regret flickered across his features. "Sleep well, Clara. I'll keep watch again tonight." As she lay in bed later, Clara replayed their conversation in her mind. Adam's gentle touch on her cheek had awakened sensations she'd thought long buried: desire, hope, possibility. But the day's events had also brought stark reality into focus. Adam was hunting dangerous men, and his presence put her household at risk as much as it protected it. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Clara found herself imagining a different future than the lonely one she'd resigned herself to, one where Adam's steady presence became a permanent fixture in her home and her heart. The next few days passed in a heightened state of vigilance. Adam completed the footbridge across the creek, a sturdy structure of solid craftsmanship that Clara knew would last for years. He also reinforced the doors and added simple but effective security measures to the windows. The boarding house had never been more sound. Nor had Clara ever felt safer within its walls, not because of the physical improvements, but because of the man who had made them. Word came from the sheriff that the suspicious men had been seen leaving town, heading east. Adam remained cautious, but some of the immediate tension eased. In the evenings, he and Clara continued to spend time together after the other boarders retired, their conversations growing deeper, more personal. Adam spoke of his family back in Illinois, parents now deceased, a sister in Denver, a brother who had died at Gettysburg. Clara shared stories of her childhood, her dreams of someday traveling to San Francisco or even New York City, ambitions that had been set aside first for marriage and then for survival. On the 7th day after Adam's arrival, a letter came for him, delivered by a rider from the sheriff's office. Clara watched his expression darken as he read it, her heart sinking with the certainty that it contained news that would take him away. "Garner's been spotted in Gold Hill," Adam confirmed when they were alone. "That's less than a day's ride from here." "You're leaving then," Clara said, working to keep her voice steady. Adam folded the letter slowly. "I gave my word to Thomas's widow. I understand." He looked at her intently. "Do you? Because I'm starting to wonder if I understand myself anymore." He ran a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. "A week ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. Now." "Now," Clara prompted when he didn't continue. "Now there's you," he said simply. The directness of his statement took Clara's breath away. "Adam, I know it's too soon," he interrupted gently. "We've known each other only a week, but I've lived enough to recognize when something matters, when someone matters." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you saying?" Adam stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm saying that for the first time in years, I'm thinking about more than the next town, the next job. I'm thinking about a future, Clara. One that includes a home. One that includes you." Clara steadied herself against the table, overwhelmed by his words and her own surging emotions. "You have obligations," she reminded him, though it pained her to do so. "Yes, and I need to see this through." His expression was resolute yet torn. "But I want you to know that I intend to come back, if you'll have me." Clara took a deep breath, marshaling her courage. "And if I asked you to stay, to let someone else pursue Garner?" Adam's face reflected his inner conflict. "I'd be tempted," he admitted. "More tempted than I've ever been to set aside a duty, but I don't think I could live with myself. And I'm not sure you could respect a man who abandoned his promises." He was right, Clara knew. The very integrity that drew her to Adam would be compromised if he stayed for her sake. "How long will you be gone?" she asked instead. "A few days. A week at most." Adam took her hands in his touch sending warmth through her fingers. "Clara, I know this isn't the proper way to court a lady, but nothing about our meeting has been conventional." A small smile touched her lips despite her concern. "No, it certainly hasn't been." Adam's thumb traced circles on her palm, his expression growing serious again. "When I return, if you're willing, I'd like to do this properly. Court you as you deserve to be courted." Clara looked up at him, seeing the earnestness in his eyes, the hope and determination mingled there. In that moment, she made her decision. "Adam," she said softly, "when you return, I would welcome your courtship." The smile that spread across his face transformed his features, erasing years of solitude and hardship. Without warning, he lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'll come back to you," he promised, his voice husky with emotion. "You have my word." Adam left at dawn the next day, his few possessions packed, his horse freshly groomed and fed. Clara stood on the porch as he mounted up, wearing her best dress despite the early hour, her hair neatly pinned beneath her bonnet. "Be careful," she urged, fighting to keep her voice steady. "These men are dangerous." "I've dealt with their kind before," Adam assured her, though his expression remained serious. "I don't take unnecessary risks. See that you don't. You have promises to keep." Adam's eyes softened. "Yes, madam, I do." He tipped his hat, a gesture that had become dear to Clara in their short time together. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone. Keep the doors locked at night." "I managed before you came," she reminded him with a small smile. "I'll manage until you return." With a final nod, Adam turned his horse and rode away. Clara watched until he disappeared from sight, a strange mixture of fear and hope swirling in her chest. The boarding house felt emptier without Adam's presence, though Clara kept herself busy with the usual tasks: cooking, cleaning, tending to her boarders' needs. Miss Willoughby watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing, while Benjamin seemed oblivious to the change in atmosphere. 3 days passed with no word. Clara found herself checking the road whenever she was outside, listening for hoofbeats that didn't come. On the 4th day, a spring storm rolled in, reminiscent of the one that had brought Adam to her door. As rain lashed against the windows, Clara hung fresh laundry in the covered porch, remembering how Adam had appeared like an apparition in the downpour, offering help when she'd needed it most. By the 5th day, anxiety had begun to gnaw at her. Adam had said a week at most. Surely he would have sent word if he expected to be delayed longer. Clara forced herself to maintain her routines, to show a calm face to her boarders, but inside, worry had taken root. On the 6th evening, as Clara was preparing dinner, she heard a commotion from the direction of town, shouting voices, the sound of galloping horses. She stepped onto the porch, straining to see through the twilight. In the distance, she could make out several riders approaching at speed, though whether toward her property or simply passing by, she couldn't tell. Instinctively, she moved back inside, securing the door. Adam's warnings echoed in her mind as she quickly extinguished the lamps visible from outside, then hurried upstairs to alert her boarders. "Stay in your rooms," she instructed them. "There may be trouble." Minutes later, the riders thundered past the boarding house without slowing. Clara watched from a darkened window as they continued east, eventually disappearing into the gathering darkness. Only then did she allow herself to breathe normally again. "Probably just cowboys in a hurry," Benjamin suggested when they gathered cautiously for dinner. Miss Willoughby's expression was more skeptical. "Cowboys don't usually ride like that unless they're running from something or someone." Clara served the meal in silence, her thoughts turning to Adam. Was he among those pursuing the riders? Was he safe? The questions circled in her mind without answers. That night, sleep eluded her entirely. Every sound, the house settling, branches scratching against windows, distant animal calls, had her reaching for the small pistol Adam had insisted she keep near her bed before he left. Dawn was just breaking when Clara heard it, the distinct sound of a single horse approaching at a walk. Her heart leapt to her throat as she quickly dressed, her fingers fumbling with buttons in her haste. By the time she reached the front door, the rider was dismounting in the yard. Adam stood there, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun. For a moment, Clara couldn't move, could barely breathe. Then she was running, propriety forgotten, as she flew down the steps and across the yard. Adam caught her in his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Clara clutched at his coat, breathing in his scent, reassuring herself that he was real, that he had returned as promised. "You're here," she whispered, pulling back just enough to see his face. "You're safe." His smile was tired but genuine. "I told you I'd come back." Only then did Clara notice the bandage visible at his collar, the way he favored his left side. "You're hurt," she gasped, stepping back to examine him more carefully. "It's nothing serious," Adam assured her. "Bullet grazed my shoulder during the arrest. Doctor in Gold Hill patched me up." "Arrest," Clara seized on the word. "You found him." "Garner," Adam nodded, his expression somber yet satisfied. "We did. He and his gang won't be troubling anyone again. Those riders that passed by last night, that was the sheriff and his deputies escorting them to Sacramento to stand trial." Relief washed over Clara, not just for the removal of the threat but for the completion of Adam's obligation. "And Thomas's widow, she'll have justice now. She will." Adam's hand came up to cup Clara's cheek, his touch as gentle as she remembered. "I kept my promise to her. Now I intend to keep my promise to you." Clara leaned into his touch, years of loneliness melting away in the warmth of his gaze. "You should rest," she said practically, though she made no move to step away. "Your injury will heal," Adam finished. Then, with a tenderness that took her breath away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Clara found herself responding, her arms sliding around his neck as the kiss deepened into something more certain, more passionate. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I've been thinking about doing that since the moment I saw you fighting with that clothesline in the rain," he confessed. Clara laughed softly, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. "Is that so? And here I thought you were just being a good Samaritan." "Well, my mother did raise me to help ladies in distress," Adam teased, his arms still circling her waist. "But I don't recall her saying anything about falling in love with them." The word hung in the air between them, momentous and perfect. Clara's heart felt too full for her chest, emotions she'd kept carefully contained for so long finally breaking free. "Love," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam's expression grew serious again, his eyes searching hers. "Yes, love, I know it's fast, Clara, too fast by most standards. But I've spent enough years alone to recognize what matters when I find it." His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I love you, and if you need time to," Clara silenced him with another kiss, pouring into it all the words she couldn't yet articulate. When they separated, she smiled up at him, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "I don't need time," she said simply. "I love you too, Adam Lawson." The sun had fully risen now, casting golden light across the yard where they stood embraced. In the distance, the new footbridge gleamed, a testament to Adam's craftsmanship and a symbol of the connection that had formed between them, unexpected, strong, and built to last. "What happens now?" Clara asked, reality beginning to seep back in despite her happiness. "Will you stay in Marysville?" Adam nodded, his expression certain. "If you'll have me, I'm thinking of opening a carpentry shop in town. The sheriff mentioned they could use a deputy with experience too if I'm interested. And the boarding house." Clara had built her life around the establishment, for all its challenges. "That's entirely up to you," Adam said, his hands warm at her waist. "We could continue running it together, or sell it if you prefer. Build something new." The possibilities stretched before them, bright and full of promise. Clara thought of the lonely future she'd resigned herself to, compared to the one now opening before her with Adam at her side. "Together," she repeated, liking the sound of it. "I think I'd like that very much." Adam's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "So would I, Clara, so would I." In the months that followed, Marysville watched the unfolding of what many called the most romantic courtship the town had seen in years. Adam Lawson, the former deputy marshal turned carpenter and occasional lawman, courted widow Clara Zimmerman with a devotion that became the talk of the community. They could be seen walking together on Sundays, his hand steadying her across the footbridge he had built. They were spotted at church socials, their heads bent close in conversation. They were observed in town, selecting fabric for new curtains or discussing improvements to the boarding house that was gradually transforming under their combined care. By autumn, when golden light bathed the Sierra foothills and the first cool breezes hinted at the coming winter, Adam and Clara were married in a simple ceremony in the town's white-steepled church. Miss Willoughby wept unabashedly, while Benjamin Foster stood proudly as Adam's best man. Clara wore a dress of pale blue silk, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a conventional veil, and Adam couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle to join her future to his. Their wedding night was spent not in some grand hotel, but in the boarding house that had brought them together in a room Adam had secretly renovated while Clara was helping with harvest celebrations in town, transforming her modest quarters into a proper master bedroom with a large bed, a new dresser, and curtains that caught the morning light just so. As winter settled over Marysville, Adam's carpentry business flourished, his reputation for quality work spreading throughout the county. Clara continued to run the boarding house, now with Adam's steady support, and together they created a home that became known not just for its comfort and good food, but for the warmth of welcome that greeted every guest. Spring arrived again, the creek swelling with snowmelt, testing the strength of Adam's bridge and finding it unshakable. Clara stood on that bridge one evening, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, when Adam joined her, slipping his arm around her waist with the easy familiarity of husband to wife. "Beautiful," he murmured, though his eyes were on her rather than the sunset. Clara leaned against him, content in a way she had never imagined possible a year earlier. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The traveling, the freedom?" Adam considered the question seriously, as he did all questions. "No," he said finally. "What I thought was freedom was really just running. This," he gestured to the house behind them, the life they were building together. "This is true freedom, being exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with." Clara turned in his arms to face him, her heart full. "I never thought I'd find this again," she admitted. "After Jonathan died, I convinced myself that one chance at love was all anyone could expect." "And now," Adam prompted, brushing a tender kiss against her forehead. "Now I know better," Clara replied, rising on tiptoe to meet his lips with hers. "Now I know that sometimes love comes when you least expect it, even in the middle of a rainstorm with laundry hanging on the line." Adam laughed, the sound warming Clara from within. "Best day of my life, seeing you fighting that clothesline in the rain," he declared. "Though I admit, at the time I was mostly thinking about helping a lady in distress, not finding the love of my life." "The love of your life," Clara teased, though her eyes grew serious. "That's quite a commitment, Mr. Lawson." "One I intend to keep," he assured her, drawing her closer. "For all the years we have together." As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Clara reflected on how completely her life had changed in the space of a year, from lonely widow struggling to maintain a boarding house to beloved wife with a thriving business and a future full of possibilities. All because a storm had brought a stranger to her door, a man who had held both her clothesline and her hand when she needed it most. By the following spring, Clara and Adam welcomed their first child, a son they named Thomas Jonathan Lawson, in honor of both the friend whose death had set Adam on the path to Marysville and the husband whose memory Clara still honored. The boy had his father's steady gaze and his mother's determined spirit, a combination that promised both adventure and stability in the years to come. The boarding house evolved as their family grew. Adam added rooms, improved the kitchen, built a proper dining room that could seat 12. Clara planted a garden that became the envy of Marysville, her preserves winning ribbons at the county fair. Together, They transformed the property into a gathering place for the community, hosting celebrations and offering shelter to those in need. Years passed, marked by the steady rhythm of seasons and the milestones of family life. A daughter joined their son, Catherine Elizabeth, with golden curls like her mother's and a talent for storytelling that kept the boarding house guests entertained. Adam's carpentry shop became the most respected in the county, his pieces sought after for their beauty and durability. Clara, no longer defined solely as a widow or even as the boarding house proprietress, discovered a talent for organization that made her invaluable to town committees and church functions. Through it all, through joys and sorrows, through prosperity and hardship, through the inevitable challenges that face any marriage, Adam and Clara Lawson remained each other's steadfast support. The love that had kindled so quickly between them never dimmed, but rather grew deeper, richer, strengthened by shared experience and mutual respect. On their 10th anniversary, Adam presented Clara with a special gift, a small painting of the boarding house as it had looked on the day they met, complete with laundry flapping in the wind and rain clouds gathering overhead. At the bottom, he had inscribed words that brought tears to her eyes. The moment everything changed. Clara hung it in their bedroom, a daily reminder of how a simple act of kindness during a storm had altered the course of two lives forever. In the decades that followed, as their children grew and grandchildren eventually joined the family, the story of how Adam and Clara met became a beloved family legend, retold at gatherings and celebrations. "Tell us again," the grandchildren would beg, gathered around the fireplace in the boarding house parlor that had witnessed the beginning of their grandparents' love story. "Tell us about Grandpa and the laundry in the rain." And Clara would smile at Adam across the room, their eyes meeting in shared remembrance, before beginning the tale that never grew old in the telling. It was a stormy April day in 1876, and I was fighting to save my laundry from the sudden downpour when a stranger appeared on the road.